inflation. Now I'm going to keep this video short and sweet, so enjoy.
What is this video again? Oh yes, inflation. Inflation is simply just how much the price of an item goes up by. For instance, say I've got a little scrambled egg, oh, there we are, look, scrambled egg on toast, and a cup of coffee, look, some banging munch.
Recurring segment on our show called Explain That Gram, where we do a deep.
And say this at a restaurant is £3, and inflation was 3%. Let me try to do the math there. Now the new price, if inflation was 3%, the new price of this would be £3.09. That is inflation. It's just how much the price of an item goes up by.
There are three main objectives that central banks aim for: high economic growth, low unemployment rate, and low inflation. They're the three objectives. Now there's different policies, there's different ways they maintain this. When you have low unemployment and high economic growth, that will lead to high inflation. Now there's always going to be a natural level of inflation, and we want a little bit of inflation because that shows economic growth. But what all central banks have to make sure that they do is that they don't want to let inflation get out of hand. That's why they bring out their policies, that's why they bring out their interest rates. They change all these things up to control those three main objectives: economic growth, unemployment rate, and inflation. Now in this next example I'm showing you, this is when unemployment rate is high and economic growth is low. So then you can see what the central banks do to boost economic growth, because that's what they want. At this stage they're not really bothered about inflation. They'll tackle inflation later on.
Right, this is the story of inflation. I'm going to tell you what's what. See, back in March 2020, unemployment rates were high. No one had any money. Economic growth was low. So the Fed stepped in and lowered interest rates and started printing off money. Stimulus checks, everyone was getting bread. And I'm not talking Kingsmill, I'm talking dollar bills. They also bought government bonds off retail banks. Price of government bonds rose and bond yields decreased. Now retail banks had a load of cash from selling these bonds, and people were taking out loans because interest rates were so low, and companies were taking out loans from these retail banks because interest rates were so low. And retail banks, using this money, also bought corporate bonds off companies. Now the price of corporate bonds went up and the yields therefore went down. So now ain't no one investing in bonds because returns for bonds are so low. Because when we talk about yields going down, that's an interest rate. So ain't no one going to invest in bonds if the interest rate's gone down, because obviously you're not making as much of a return. And companies had so much cash from loans, from selling bonds, so they can therefore start to expand and employ again, which is exactly what they did. And people going back to work and still receiving stimulus checks. Also taking out loans because interest rates were so low. Even investors among ourselves are struggling. What do we put our money in? Because bond yields were low, stocks were high at this time, crypto was high. So I guess some of them probably spent money as well. So there was just manic spending everywhere due to everyone having bread. And there was also supply chain shortages to add to this, and companies couldn't get items in stock quick enough. Demand was high, skyrocketing, and supply was low. And there's only one way that the prices can go, and they went up dramatically.
So you have £10 and you decide to put it in a savings account that offers 1% interest. So at the end of year one, you will have £10 and 10p, and you keep it in your savings account, and you earn 1% again for the second year. So you will earn 1% on £10 and 10p. Your balance after the second year will be £10, 20 pence, 0.01. Say if a full English breakfast costs £10 at a restaurant and inflation is 3%. Now at the end of year one, the cost of that full English breakfast will be £10 and 30p. Now at the end of year two, this full English breakfast will be £10 and 60.9, so almost £10.61. But your money in your savings account will only be £10.20.01. So have you actually gained money? No, you haven't, because inflation's going up higher. The cost of items around you is increasing at a faster rate than your money in your investment in your savings account. So you're losing money over time. So each year, technically speaking, you're losing 2%. And not a lot of people recognise this. They stick their money in savings account, and that's all they do. They don't invest it, they'll stick their money in savings account. But really, truly, savings account loses you money over time. In most cases, inflation will be higher than your savings account interest. So hopefully now you can understand, well, you've got to get investing. You need to make back the rate of inflation each year just to have the same amount of money. What that money can buy each year will be the same. Now with that concept in mind, hopefully you can see how inflation affects lenders and borrowers differently. Because if I'm a lender and I'm giving a loan to someone, say if I give £100 loan, so you take my 100 quid, and I say interest on the loan 4%, so I will get £104 at the end of the year from you. But what if inflation is 5% that year? You buy a TV for £100 and inflation is 5%. Now that TV that you bought for 100 quid at the start of the year is now worth 105 quid. And how much have you paid the lender? Well, you paid £104 because he's charged you 4% interest. So technically speaking, you've gained £1. So this is why high inflation is great as a borrower. If I'm taking out a loan, I want high inflation. If I look tired, subscribe to find out why.